We're working for Sabo anyways.
G'day, James.
G'day, folks.
Hey, James.
Howdy.
I've gone with the footy theme, mate.
Who have you? I can't read that. 49ers.
It's
San
the
Francisco.
49ers. That's it, mate. We're hot favourites for the Super Bowl this year.
Is that because
Playoff start.
Is that your team because you're a Taylor Swift fan, or is that a long-standing?
Yeah.
Well, who isn't a Taylor Swift fan for a start?
That's right. That's too true.
And I started following them years ago when I was a teenager, actually, when good old Don Lane was presenting the NFL on late night TV. So, but I didn't sort of follow it that closely until more recently when we were in San Francisco when they had like a queue a kilometre long of people to get into a draft party. That was just like to watch a televised draft where they got one pick. It's like a queue a kilometre long to see one pick. You wouldn't see that in the draft in AFL. It's like, geez. Anyway, so that sort of rekindled my interest in it just at the right time because we're flying at the moment. So
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So while you guys are watching Big Bash, I'm watching football.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Has anyone been watching the cricket?
Sorry?
Has anyone been watching the cricket?
Yeah. I went to both Boxing Day test and third day of the pink test, and this is controversial, but the pink test now, especially the third day, that eclipses the Boxing Day test for atmosphere, for involvement. It's the go-to. If I had to pick a day on the calendar to go to the cricket, just one day, it'd be third day Sydney test, hands down.
Nice.
Well, the game is still potentially in the balance on the third day. Last time I went to a Sydney test, it was when McGrath and Warne and was it Lang retiring around that time as well? And it was against the English. Had the Barmy Army going off in the background. Geez, that was entertaining. They are so funny.
Yeah, that's good
Some of
stuff.
their songs are incredible. Yes. Well, we've Happy New Year, everybody. By the way,
yes.
Yeah,
let's hope it is
2024.
let's hope it is a Happy New Year.
Yeah.
It started pretty well. And listeners, welcome to Footy, Forest and Family. First episode for 2024. We got big news this week. For those who have been following what's been going on in forestry, there was a big federal court case on Wednesday with a decision handed down, which actually went for us rather than against us for once, which is a great relief to everybody involved because the implications of a decision going the other way were pretty dire, I think, for not just New South Wales or northeast New South Wales, which was the RFA, which was under attack, but for all RFA regions in Australia. So
Might be worth quickly setting the scene around how this federal court decision arrived here. So in 2021, the Northeast Forestry Alliance, represented by the Environmental Defenders Office, took the Commonwealth as the primary party and as a secondary party of the New South Wales government to court over what they thought was an invalid rollover of or extension of the Northeast Regional Forestry Agreement, which is an agreement between the Commonwealth and state government around environmental protections set up in our forests around harvesting operations. That court case was heard in March 2022, and the industry has really been in limbo since then, awaiting a decision from the federal court, Justice Perry, on this. There were a number of times during 2022 and 2023 when we thought we were going to get a decision, and that decision was delayed. So that caused, amongst other things, a lot of uncertainty and also concern around what that decision would look like. Before Christmas, it looked like we were going to get a decision before Christmas 2023, and then that was delayed or pushed back to the 10th of January. So basically the start of this year. Amongst all of that, you have an industry, without the ability to make long-term decisions, and environmental and activists groups who are really pinning their hopes on what they saw might be a seismic shift in forestry policy in Australia. So the 10th of December
massive.
arrived. Yeah. So that date arrived, and we got to finally hear the federal court's decision. So it was a big start to 24.
Yeah. You were involved in the Matt when they were revising them back in the day when you were with DAF.
That's right. Yeah. In a previous role that I had, I was actually involved in negotiating the RFAs between, as James said, they're bilateral agreements between the Commonwealth and the states. So there's four RFA states in Australia. So there's Victoria, New South Wales, Tasmania, and WA. And I was involved in the negotiation, if you like, the writing of the renewed upgraded RFAs. And one thing that we talked about all the way back in about sort of 2017 was a potential court case challenge against the RFAs, because as James quite rightly said, the RFAs, the Regional Forest Agreements, are for all forests within that region. So it's not just the publicly managed native forests, but also private native forests and also plantations and also national parks. And I guess that's one thing that we were conscious of back then, was to ensure that the matters were considered, like the values, the environmental, social, and economic values were considered in the renewal of the RFAs, because that was a key argument of these environmental and activist groups, was that the environmental values, particularly around climate change, for example, weren't considered. But there's a document called the Assessment of Matters Report that was actually written. So it was written by the Commonwealth and also the New South Wales government, which essentially covered all of the vast information that's been gathered since 2001 up until 2018. So with the RFAs, they were signed off between 1997 and 2001, and there was what's called a comprehensive regional assessment was undertaken. So a CRA process was undertaken between 97 and 2001, and that was basically to collect a whole heap of information to inform the making of the RFAs. And basically back in 2018, when we signed off on the RFAs were signed off by the New South Wales Premier and the Prime Minister, it was seen that there wasn't a need to do such a comprehensive assessment again, because since 2001, for example, we have the 5-yearly State of the Forest report, which is written by ABARES, so the Australian Bureau of Agriculture, Resources, Economics and Science. So that's actually an outcome out of the RFA. So that's a comprehensive report which is based on the Montreal process criteria and indicators. And also each state, for example, New South Wales, they now have what's called a forest management framework, which they didn't have back in the early 2000s, late 1990s. And each state actually has its own State of the Forest report. So there's a whole lot of information that's gathered each year by each state. And to undertake another full-blown comprehensive regional assessment process, that would have cost the Australian taxpayer in excess of $100 million and would have taken years to undertake. So why waste all that taxpayers' money? And that's where, this court case, I think this court case was a real waste of taxpayers' money. I mean, this court case would have cost the taxpayer millions of dollars. Exactly.
The EDA, which brought the case, they're funded by the government. And then the people defending it, which is the federal and state governments, they're paying to defend the case. And Sue Higginson, the Greens MP, Sue Higginson, was quoted in the ABC report saying that it was a very ambitious case. So what is she saying there? Was it like a very expensive Hail Mary to try to tear down the industry, which has ended up costing the taxpayers millions of dollars for no good reason? So,
Michelle, what do you think the outcome is from your end of this decision? For one thing, it allows business to have more certainty and confidence in terms of investing in the industry, as well as the downstream impacts of that, being able to get on with that business certainty, also the certainty and job security for workers. Environmentally speaking, and looking forward as we do check our environmental laws from time to time. What do you think the outcome of this decision is?
Yeah, well, I think it just gives a bit of confidence in what we've, I guess, understood the purpose of the regional forest agreements being, which is that they are an equivalent process to what is required federally for environmental and biodiversity protection. That is something that's agreed between the state and Commonwealth and then is implemented by the states through their regulatory systems. And really it's the regulatory systems at the state level which are the kind of agile bit. It's the regional forestry agreements that provide that kind of equivalent process, and the judge said exactly that. I think I get a bit concerned sometimes when in the media they often represent regional forest agreements as allowing forest operations to essentially bypass or be exempt from federal law, and that's not strictly the case. Forest operations are exempt from process that is usually required under federal law because the regional forest agreement represents an equivalent process with the Commonwealth and the states both agreeing that it's an equivalent process. And so I was really pleased to have that kind of view reiterated by the view of the court as well, because it sort of shows, it's the reason that regional forest agreements are established is because they represent that strategic view of the whole forest landscape and a kind of a process-based sort of approach to how you're going to strategically manage for all values across the landscape. So I think that's really important to have that clarified and what they're actually there to do. And it's certainly by no means an exemption from needing to protect species and conserve important values. That's actually what they're there to do. And it's agreed between the Commonwealth and the state that this is a sound approach for how we can actually ensure all values across the landscape are considered, protected and conserved as appropriate, whilst also facilitating activities in the forest such as timber harvesting.
I think it was a very expensive exercise in actually articulating and reinforcing what the regulatory settings between the Commonwealth and state governments are when it comes to forestry operations. I think one of the other things it has done, this federal court decision has done, is elevate in the public consciousness the role that timber plays in our lives. It has actually given the industry the ability to discuss and point out some of the products that come out of our hardwood industry and their critical role in things like the economy in our daily lives, but also things like power poles that will be critical to the rollout of our renewable energy projects, as well as the need to increase timber in our built environment to reach our carbon emission and climate change goals. So the positive side of coming through this case is I think it has given us the ability to elevate the conversation around timber and its role in our lives.
Yeah, we've done a pretty poor job in the past of sort of articulating that, I think, and it's right that people are concerned about what happens in our environment and in our forests, and they very justifiably could think that it's all bulldozers and chains getting dragged through the bush, but I think this whole case has shown that the RFAs are there to protect the forest and make sure that things are done ethically and sensitively to the environment. And the science just stacks up, the science in many different fields. I mean, Michelle, you've been recently you came out in strident defence of what happens in the bush, but from a academic's perspective, I mean, it's got to be our best chance, really, doesn't it? I mean, to keep these sorts of things going under this sort of regulatory framework.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think we've been watching quite closely what's happened in Victoria since the native timber sector was closed down, which came into effect on the 1st of January, and one of my colleagues did a bit of an analysis on the imports of hardwood sawn timber, so the high quality stuff, into Victoria since that decision was made, and the graph sort of had been relatively stable, and then it's just gone like this, where there's in excess of, what do we just check this graph? Yeah, it's about 15,000 cubic metres of imports, and that graph's still on the way up. And the primary countries that those imports are coming from are Brazil, Malaysia, the United States, amongst others, including Uruguay and Indonesia. So, you know, it's...
What's the problem with getting our wood?
Consider these broader.
What's the problem with getting our wood from those jurisdictions, Michelle?
Well, the reality is we don't have any agency or control about the forest management practices that happen there. We do in our own country. And that's right, you know, we should always be looking at our own processes and systems and our regulatory environment and checking in on that and updating it. You know, the regional forest agreements have 5 yearly reviews. That's part of why. So that we can be confident that those rules are actually effectively addressing environmental and other concerns as well as facilitating timber. We just literally do not have any control or oversight over what happens in other countries. We know that many of those countries, particularly in the third world, that those imports are coming from much poorer practices, don't have the oversight that we're able to implement here in Australia. And so we're really just sort of transferring our moral responsibility about forests and managing forests well onto other countries, which I think is completely unfair, and we should be looking at ways to meet our own sovereign domestic need. That's the right thing to do.
Well, do all those other countries get, sorry, Michelle, Matt, do these other countries get certification?
Yeah, they do, but certification is based on the level of regulation in those countries. So in Australia, we have probably the tightest legislation and then obviously associated regulation, which is, you know, for example, your codes of practice, for example. So as Michelle quite rightly said, and both Michelle and I are foresters by background, and you know, having spent a bit of time overseas and seen forestry operations, I've got no doubt, and like Michelle, having been a practicing forester, that Australia does have the most stringent codes of practice and regulations associated with forest management. So that's always one thing that amuses me, is that, you know, within Australia we seem to have this mentality, unfortunately, of shutting down our sustainably managed native forests, which do actually provide positive biodiversity benefits for our environment as well. Like, you know, a well-managed forest, the sustainably managed forest, does certainly reduce the bushfire risk. And if you get a wildfire in a native forest, a catastrophic wildfire, it's going to wipe everything out. So, and there's all of the science behind the climate mitigation benefits of a sustainably managed forest. That's absolutely proven. So, it's just interesting, these activists, they sort of pop the champagne corks when they're successful in shutting down publicly managed native forestry in Victoria and WA, but you don't hear boo out of them about the timber that we're importing from some of those countries that Michelle mentioned. So I struggle to understand, because, you know, I understand where they're coming from, in that they put out this front that they care about the environment, and as a forester and obviously you, James, and Justin also, and Michelle, cares about the environment. I think we're after the same thing, but I'm sort of perplexed as to what environment they actually do care about if they're trying to shut down such a sustainable industry that, you know, first and foremost has really positive environmental benefits. It's not just all about you know, the economic side of things and using wood, but and obviously wood has benefits over other products such as steel and concrete as well. So that just always perplexes me that they trying to shut down something that's number one, it's actually good for the environment. It's been done for 60,000 plus years by our traditional owners. So just
James, at a political level, you could what do you see the future? Do you think that they'll get wise to what's going on here? I mean, we heard a rumour that the New South Wales government was prepared to shut it all down pending this court case. You know, but publicly they're sort of giving us support. So I don't know what's happening there.
There's no doubt that this federal court decision, a finding in favour of the existing framework, has in a lot of ways unlocked the ability to progress some of the policy that was sitting around not being used because this decision was hanging over the heads of policymakers. It's unlocked the ability to invest in timber as both a policy lever that can do some things like making sure we're getting more timber into the built environment, but also talking about what the future of this resource can do in terms of providing carbon credits, its role in sequestering carbon, and what those markets look like in the future. And like I say, it has got politicians and the media talking about timber. What I think our role is in terms of industry is to continue the momentum around having those conversations. Where are we driving policy forward in terms of regenerative operations that allow us to capture carbon credits, making sure we're planting more trees in the ground, whether it's in our softwood or hardwood estate, managing our public forests so that we continue to have sustainable, regenerative, accessible public forests that provide wood products well into the future. I think we need to capitalise on this moment as an industry and make sure that we set up the industry in the long term. That's our opportunity right now, is to have those conversations with politicians while the momentum is there, and juxtapose that to what is happening in Victoria. Michelle, what you've described there is regressive policy in terms of what's happening in Victoria, and it's an immediate effect. We're 12 days into the new year after they've shut down an industry, and they're heavily relying on imports from overseas jurisdictions. That is a sovereign risk to Australia. We've just been through one of the biggest shake-ups in terms of global disruptions in over a century in being able to import products into Australia, and we saw a spike in materials and the challenges that we have in accessing those materials. So we know that we need to be more self-sufficient in that space. And the other thing it really hits home with in terms of policymakers is the cost that may be passed on to consumers when we're in a cost of living crisis, when we're seeing real pressure on households to make budgetary decisions so that they can keep their heads above water. Closing an industry like this absolutely has flow-on effects to everyday families and folks. It'll have an impact on electricity and energy prices. It'll have an impact on raw materials and the ability for the building, construction, logistics, freight industries to transport the goods and build what they need to do. So we need to capture this moment. I think there's really strong momentum here. And
it's kind of backfired a little bit, hasn't it? Sort of, this whole case has sort of backfired. Like it's given us a bit more momentum now. It's sort of like you see the pendulum swinging back the other way a little bit. And Joel Fitzgibbon's column that was in the Australian today, that was really well articulated in just 600 words. And he made a very good point actually, because yesterday there was an article from Lyndon Schneider's from, I can't remember the organisation that he's with, but anyway, he's an anti-forestry proponent who made the comment that all this native forestry, all it's being used for is pallets and wood chips, and Joel very rightly said, well, look, it's a great thing that we're able to make pallets and wood chips from the offcuts from the timber that's not being used for high quality floor and building materials. But that seems to be just the thing that's being focused on. And plus we need pallets because hardwood pallets are so important for transporting goods. I mean, what's the alternative? Steel or plastic? Softwood is just a single use, like they break straight away, so you only get one use out of them. So very important to keeping food on the shelves in supermarkets. So
the humble hardwood pallet, it's the workhorse of our economy. It really is. Justin, what was the sentiment like across some of the workers that you work alongside after this decision? What was the feeling there?
Great relief. It can't be underestimated the impact that it has on people who work in our industry when they're constantly bombarded with this, the misrepresentations about the industry and plus all this pressure that's been piled on. And it's a wave of momentum which has been continuing since 2019 when the Victorian government made its decision and then the West Australian decision. And people just people are starting to feel like, you know, the writing's on the wall, and this federal court case hanging over our heads was of great concern. I mean, these are people with families who are concerned about their future. I mean, we're not talking about people who can just go into any other line of work. It's difficult to find jobs in some of these regions, and quite frankly, many people enjoy working in forestry and with wood, and so for them to sort of, you know, have an uncertain future, and it sort of trickles up into, you know, into the management and other people who are sort of, how do we keep our workforce positive and looking forward to a future where we can see it quite clearly at a political level and an environmental level, that there's a solution to a lot of our issues, and that people should feel proud to work in any industry because of all the benefits that it provides. And this is the message that we're really trying to get across. But then you pick up the paper, or you turn on the radio or something, and you hear something quite different. So that's been the challenge. But certainly this decision, I mean, the science is on our side. We've seen carbon science. We've seen the koala science. We've seen a lot of science which supports what we're doing. And then the federal court cases has endorsed their regulatory framework around how we do it. So, I mean, what's the problem now? We're all concerned about the environment. I mean, fair enough that people should feel like they should take action on the environment. We get that, but please see that we're not the problem here. It's like we're a massive part of the solution. I think that's hopefully that message starts to get out.
I think James made a really good point about the momentum, and this is a good opportunity for the industry, and it's probably one thing that I guess has probably frustrated me over the years, and probably all of you on this call, is the fact that we haven't really been able to sort of, cash in on opportunities such as this. So, there was so much. There was quite a bit of media before the court case. There was certain newspapers and media outlets that talk quite a bit about the court case, but there's pretty much been nothing since the. So those same media outlets, if the court case had gone the other way, I'm sure it'd be almost on the front page of some of those newspapers.
Oh yeah.
There's pretty much been boo. I mean, I saw something briefly on one of the commercial news channels the other night, like a little 10-second grab, and it just sort of mentioned something about, obviously used the term logging again, and said, the New South Wales logging industry, whatever they called it, has won a court case today to continue logging in New South Wales state forests, and kind of looked at it and thought, well, that's not overly glowing for the industry as well. Like, it's kind of just saying, well, they're going to continue doing, a bad thing to the forest. So I'd really love to see us, cash in on this and use the momentum, because I think with the 2019-20 bushfires, I think that was a great opportunity for us as well. But unfortunately, that also went the other way, because there was various activist groups came out and falsely made claims that sustainably harvesting our native forests is actually bad for the forest from a fire mitigation perspective. It's actually the opposite. So. Yeah. It'd be great to see us, continue to promote things, because like that, I think Justice Perry made a really pertinent comment at the end, and basically said that this is now a case for the politicians. So here we are. I mean,
keep it out of the courts.
It's not only backed up by science and best practice management. It's also legally compliant what's done. So it's now up to so it's absolutely. That's probably where James comes into play, I suppose. It's absolutely now in the hands of the politicians. So it's absolutely a political basketball that keeps on getting thrown around.
I think it's worth throwing down a challenge throughout the forestry industry. Is there's probably been a culture of thinking, if we keep our head down, if we don't talk about our industry, then we won't attract the attention. Often, attention that we don't necessarily want. I think that needs to be turned around. We've got a fantastic story to tell. The industry is full of great people, great stories, and not just great products, but an incredible story in terms of how forests are managed. So we need to tap into all of those. One of the really cut through lines from this week has been the role that utility poles play in our electricity distribution, but also in our transition to renewable energies. The utility poles are ubiquitous. They're everywhere, but they're invisible because we're so exposed to them every day. And we need millions of those poles, and they don't just spring out of the ground there. They come from forests that are harvested through our state. So we need to tell that story more. We can't have a transition to renewable energy without hardwood poles. And the other important story that came out as well is just ahead of this, the federal court decision, when we had those severe rains in southeast Queensland, and there was flooding. A lot of folks lost
we need to build
power.
an ark out of wood.
That's right. A lot of folks lost power overnight. Some of the hardwood companies on the mid-coast were able to send hardwood poles up to southeast Queensland to allow households to be reconnected to power. You simply cannot have that turnaround if you're looking at alternative products like steel and concrete in that time frame. So they are critical and they're essential. So we need to elevate those stories along the way as well.
So James, you just hit on something that's near and dear to me. So I'm often talking to people about power poles. So power poles are a great story. So power poles have a lifespan. Hardwood power poles have a lifespan of about 80 years. They actually last longer than steel and concrete power poles. And the good thing about that is so the vast majority of our hardwood power poles comes from the northeast region, New South Wales, and also southeast Queensland as well. And it takes about 80 years for a hardwood power pole, so for example, like a spotted gum, for example, to actually grow in the forest naturally. So it's a really good story. So a hardwood power pole has a lifespan of 80 years. So you get into the forest, you sustainably harvest a power pole, put it into the ground, and then 80 years later that power pole comes to the end of its life. Go back in the forest where you cut that tree down. 80 years later, which how long it takes to grow, there's now the power pole there ready to grow. And that power pole has come from a tree which sequesters and absorbs carbon, as opposed to steel and concrete, which are carbon intensive products. So mate, power poles are a great example. It's also a great story to tell, because frustratingly often hear people say, we should be using steel and concrete, and then I basically give them that story. So power poles is a great one to tell.
It's a good start to 2024. Let's hope we can keep it going. Did you guys get a bit of a break over the Christmas, Michelle? Did you get away? Did you go camping or anything over the Christmas with the family?
No, I haven't had a break yet. Too much work. But no, in 2 weeks' time. Not next week. No, not next week. The week after, I'm going to take time off and getting bush, getting some good rejuvenation time in the forest somewhere. So it'd be great. Looking forward to it.
Very nice. What about you, James? Get together with the family?
Yeah, we did actually. We went down the Hume to Melbourne. We had Chrissy in Melbourne this year, which was nice. And then, as I say, we snuck in a Boxing Day test and then back up the Hume to Sydney. But it was
I'm
good
feeling
to
a bit of like Melbourne-Sydney rivalry going on here. Either the pink test is better than it's
well, it is,
already.
mate. Next year, make sure you get to the pink test, and you'll never go to another Boxing Day test again in your life.
I'll get and have a beer with you up there. How about that?
Oh, done.
We'll drag Michelle and Matt along too.
Done.
Yeah, sounds good. I see they're actually talking about potentially holding a test in Canberra, because that's where I reside, just outside of Canberra anyway. So. What are you guys' thoughts on that? Holding a test, a top.
Have you got a cricket pitch in Canberra?
Yeah, they have. Yeah. Manuka Oval. They've held. I think they've held a couple of tests there. They certainly hold the Big Bash. They play the Big Bash at Manuka Oval.
Actually, the President's 11 or something there prior to the Test series or something. Yeah,
the Prime Minister's 11. I remember back in the early 1990s watching a young Ricky Ponting play for the Prime Minister's 11 before he made a name for himself. But actually, Manuka Oval is actually a really nice ground. It's actually the actual ground surface area. It's about the same size, if not a little bit bigger, than the Melbourne Cricket Ground. Obviously, the stadium is nowhere near as big as the MCG. But so anyway, who knows? Potentially one day.
If you'll be able to pinch a test from Tassie or Queensland or Western Australia anytime soon, mate. But keep trying. But
who's the last great Canberran cricketer that we know?
Well, he's
Everyone remembers John Howard's effort in Pakistan, I think, when he was having a bowl there. So strike him out.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think there's too many. Too many local heroes here, mate.
Yeah, well, there's Brad Haddon. So Brad Haddon, the Australian wicketkeeper, he hails from Queanbeyan, which is just across the border from Canberra. It's New South Wales, which is, and Queanbeyan's pretty much a quasi suburb of Canberra anyway. So so Canberra would probably claim him. Right. Actually, I think Andrew Lyon is actually a Andrew Lyon. What's his first name now? Nathan Lyon. Sorry, Nathan Lyon. I'm pretty sure Nathan Lyon grew up in Canberra. I think he might be a.
That's a big claim, mate. That is a big claim. A few other states that will adopt him.
Did he go to uni there or something, maybe? Or
no, I think he might have. I think he might have grown up. Anyway, I'll have to fact check that one.
Spent a couple of nights in Fishwick, maybe, or is it?
Even just as important, mate, is Canberra going to get a Rugby World Cup game in 2027?
There you go.
I heard that the ACT government didn't put in a bid to hold any games there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Canberra really needs an indoor stadium for obvious reasons, particularly when games are played in the middle of July and stuff. So probably too cold, mate. Yeah, probably too cold because our stadiums are only outdoor stadiums. So if we had an indoor stadium, it might help.
So Matt, have you thought of moving? You know, Canberra doesn't seem to be delivering on the sports front.
Well, actually, I actually don't live in Canberra. I proudly live in New South Wales. So look,
in Queanbeyan.
Canberra's a good swap. Well, yeah, I live just outside of Queanbeyan, so
right.
I don't live in the Canberra bubble. I live just across the border, so it's yeah. Okay. So I'm not actually a Canberran.
Okay. All right. Well, look, have a great rest of the day. It's a beautiful hot day in Melbourne at the moment too, folks. Great weather today. I might get out there and get a bit of sun after work and have a beer. And but anyway, look, let's do this again soon. Hey,
good stuff.
Yeah, great.
Good to see you all.
Yeah.
Cheers, guys.
Right. Cheers, guys.
Bye.